Hey, welcome to A Foreigner in the Philippines. We're always talking about how to improve the relationship when you have a cross-cultural relationship, cross-cultural marriage, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is, friendship, courtship. Understanding each other may be the biggest, the most vital part of the relationship, and it's also can be the biggest hurdle that you will have. Obviously, we're talking about a foreigner coming here and finding happiness on a long-term basis with a Filipino. And I just had a letter from a friend of mine who came and stayed with us, and they are now at home and they're making their preparations for coming here. They bought a place, they're having a house built, and everything is going very well. But he wrote to me and said, is it always so difficult to get a point across to a Filipino when it starts to border on being an argument, and how quickly can it go south? Boy, it can go south very, very quickly when you're trying to get something through to someone where the appearance is that they understand your language, the English, very well. And any Filipino who would, because obviously we're talking about a foreign man coming and being married or engaged or with a Filipina, a woman here in the Philippines, and there's the apparency that they speak fluent English, and fluent English is quite an achievement. I know a lot of people that speak English as a first language, and you would have a great difficulty in getting over certain concepts, certain ideas when you're trying to express things which are not just run-of-the-mill. You know, if you're talking about, we'll see you on Wednesday at 5 o'clock, or why don't we go with you when you go to the football match, and these are all easy things. There's it's only the concept of meeting at an appropriate time. It's easy to understand. When you start to discuss other things, then it gets more difficult. That's why, certainly in the UK, everybody would agree, well, there are two things that you don't talk about to anybody. One is religion, and the other one is politics. And the reason that people people talk about being fearful of or concerned, apprehensive, shall we say, about discussing religion or politics, is that it gets into deep water very, very quickly. I mean, if you're going to have a Roman Catholic talking to a Protestant, and you're in Northern Ireland, you could be in very deep water very, very quickly. Okay, because these are concepts that are ingrained into the psyche of people. Certainly in Ireland, people kill each other, or until historically, relatively recently, it's only relatively recently that they've actually started to get things on a sane footing there. We're not talking about whether I think this is right or this is wrong. We're talking about the fact that there is great scope, great potential for having really profound misunderstandings and disagreements, misunderstandings about getting over how the other person can think in a certain way, and then when it gets into disagreements, the disagreement is verbal at first, and then it can quickly go to being in violent disagreement, especially if you introduce into the mix a little alcohol. Boy, goes south very quickly then. So we're really talking about making sure that when you talk to your Filipino, don't get too confident about being too complicated, because you need to have little checkups every so often. If you use a word that, you know, perhaps in another situation in your own country, maybe that word may have been a possible shipwreck in the conversation, make sure that your Filipino actually understands that concept. Of course, when we're in the normal course of conversation in our own native country, our conversations are peppered with right, quick change of a memory card there, so there's a bit of a glitch. But anyway, as I was saying, that our conversations when we're in our native land are peppered with colloquialisms. So all the time you are saying things which require agreement, and the phrases, we often don't know what the derivation of those sayings is. I mean, it was with great surprise that I learned many different ideas that were put forward that had a basis in fact. In the old days, certainly in the days of my grandparents, if you were said to be dirt poor, it may well be that you were living on a dirt floor in the house, that there was no floor in the house, it was dirt, hence the expression dirt floor. Back then, for instance, to make the point, if you worked in the field, you would be sunburned, and so therefore being extremely white and untouched by the sun was a sign of affluence. And that's where the idea of being a redneck goes. Redneck is a man who works in the field, and he gets sunburned. But the thing is, he's not going to expose his entire body out there, so the idea that he has a red neck and the rest of him is pure white, that will be another way of trying to find out if someone was of the lower classes, as they would say in the UK. Maybe not quite so much now. But anyway, you've got these differences in ways of describing which are accepted. Like a redneck. A redneck has become someone who might be a touch on the, maybe going to punch you up in the air if you're not very careful. You know, somebody who works in the field is a physical worker, strong, plain speaking, and so we know what these things have become. I always think of Michael Jackson. You know, before Michael Jackson ever started saying it was bad, it wasn't good, it was bad. Bad was, guess what? Bad. And then he started singing, it's bad, and suddenly we're thinking of bad as being good. So expressions change, and as long as you're in the country of origin, you keep up with those things. And yet here we are, and we're talking about quite, in some cases, about quite difficult context concepts, and we're doing it in a language which is not the first language of the Filipino. We're expecting a level of understanding from them which, if the shoe was on the other foot, you see, I've used one there right now, if the shoe was on the other foot, didn't even think about it. Now, what would a Filipino make of if the shoe was on the other foot? Why would you put a shoe on the other foot? And yet, I've heard my wife say the other day, yes, we're not going to do that. Yes, we're not doing it. Not, no, we're not doing it, as we would say in English, but yes, we're not doing it. And I mentioned this to my friend who was asking me, is it always so difficult? And when I said that, he said, well, they'd be very good at understanding the old song then. Yes, we have no bananas. See, so we have all of these things, and we take for granted that understanding is there, and we don't keep a check on it. And one of the most important things about keeping understanding straight is to keep a check on it. Because when I, in my very modest studies of Visayan or Tagalog, I get lost in seconds. You know, I've learned that "Kumusta ka?" You greet somebody, "Kumusta?" If you're just passing somebody on the road and you say "Kumusta," it means hello. If you meet and greet someone, shake their hand, and you haven't seen them for a while, you might say "Kumusta ka?" And the adding of the "ka" on the back of it means that it's a serious inquiry. You're asking how they are. And even that is fraught, isn't it? In English, it's fraught with it. I always think of a typical Jewish approach to humour. The two Jewish guys meeting for the first time in a while, and they're meeting, they shake hands and they say, hey, so, the first guy says to the second guy, so, ask me how I am, ask me how it's going. And his friend said, how's it going? He said, don't ask me. See, there's an emphasis in a way which requires a level of understanding that is beyond words. And someone said that to me the other day. What you do is beyond words. And I told Beth, we had a compliment. They said that our kindness was beyond words. And she said, what does that mean? We are full of potential shipwrecks. What I think of as potential shipwrecks, where the conversation is going well, and then it goes like that. So you've got to be careful. You've got to keep a check on all of those things which you take for granted. And as soon as you know that you are going all the way, as soon as you know that you really must try your hardest, you must hit the nail on the head, you must go the whole 9 yards, you must leave nothing unturned. You must not for a minute miss a beat. You get my drift? Okay, thanks for listening, and bye for now.